Buckle up, boys and girls, because Annie and I are road tripping west to one of our favorite states in the Union, colorful Colorado, where we're going to spend 2 days in the mile-high city of Denver to celebrate our daughter's birthday. Now, while the ladies intend to do some serious shopping, I've got my own little agenda brewing, because if there was ever a craft brew state, it's probably Colorado, where a beer geek could spend months sampling from some of the best beers on earth. But I've only got 2 days. The focus of my attention will be on the explosively hops-forward style of IPA. So while the girls put the dough in Colorado, how about you ride along with me and we'll see what kind of trouble we can get into as we search for the best IPA in Denver. Driving across the great American desert can make a guy a little bit thirsty. So Annie and I are making a quick pit stop in the small town of Hays, Kansas, where my mom's ginormous German Catholic family was supported by my grandpa's bar, and where Annie was born and raised just a click north in the booming metropolis of Plainville. There are 2 breweries in Hays, but they're situated in 3 locations. Defiance keeps their tap room on the east end of town, but if you want to eat, then you gotta hit their downtown 7th Street location, hidden just behind the post office. A few summers ago, I worked a hail repair job here in Hays that lasted 8 weeks. So during that time, I became well acquainted with the local watering holes. The food and beer at Defiance are both solid. Wood-fired pizza and gourmet burgers are the showcase items. Get a load of this shit. Annie can look you dead in the eye and even carry on a conversation with you while texting. The fuck? I decided to pair my Twisted Logic IPA with a roasted hatch chili and beer cheeseburger that I grew to love when I was working out here, back when Defiance had a killer IPA called Moontah on tap that was sadly not available today. Wah wah. Back on westbound I-70, and it wasn't long before the Rocky Mountain foothills appeared like a mirage on the horizon, and they just kept on rising until we were sure we weren't in Kansas anymore, and I knew that my quest was about to begin.
I like elevators. Do you like elevators?
Oh my God, what are you gonna do with that, babe?
The IPA style, which of course is an acronym for India Pale Ale, originated in the UK in the latter part of the 18th century. Back then, a few enterprising brewers leapt to the challenge of creating a beer that could survive the passage to India by ship without spoiling. The goal was a beer with a long cellar life. There's a couple ways to do that. Contaminating microbes can be thwarted by raising the ABV and by boosting the amount of bittering hops. The IPA style involves both. The aromatic flower cones of the humble hops vine had already been used in brewing for about 1,000 years as a bittering agent, added to the boil to offset the cloying sweetness of robust ale styles, creating a more balanced flavor profile. Hops had other properties that weren't fully understood at the time, but the results couldn't be ignored. Hops, as it turns out, contains natural antibiotics. By boosting the amount of bittering hops, brewers found that they could create a beer with a 2-year shelf life, which was unheard of at the time. Think of hops as a fuel stabilizer. I find this interesting because these days, IPAs are not the beers you want sitting on the shelf for months. You want to pour them young and fresh. The reason for this is that in this day and age, the wonderful aromatic properties of hops is the sought-after quality of an IPA, and these dissipate rapidly over time. But back in the 18th century, the antibiotic properties were simply practical, solving the problem of spoilage, so an IPA back then was way different than an IPA now. It would have been served flat, warm, and bitter, with little to no hops aroma. Probably an acquired taste. It was purely functional, maybe not the best, but drinkable. These days, we've become a culture of hops addicts. We can't get enough. Tons of hops are added throughout the boil, from beginning to the final seconds and beyond. Hops are being added to the brew while it's fermenting, and even after the fermentation is finished, what we now call dry hopping, which really makes no sense because the hops are still getting wet. Another common misconception is that an IPA is pale in color. Not so. IPAs come in all colors, from blonde to jet black. Pale ales were originally lighter in color because the barley was lightly roasted for that style. Now, that doesn't really matter. The style is defined by the huge hops bill and a slightly higher ABV. Nowadays, the IPA style has fragmented into numerous sub-styles. My personal favorites are New England, Hazy, and of course Imperial, which can be a modification of any beer style by boosting the grain bill, resulting in a bigger beer with a higher ABV. One of my favorite IPAs happens to be on tap right here. It's called Juicy Bits by Weldwork Brewing out of Loveland, Colorado, and that's what I'm ordering for my first taste of the Rocky Mountains. Due to the constant hailstorms in late summer, my hail-chasing partner and I have spent months in Colorado, working, fishing, and sampling local brews. In Colorado Springs, for example, there were over 40 breweries at last count, and I'm pretty sure we tried every damned one of them. However, nothing I tried in the Springs area compared to one hazy IPA I found in the Centennial Borough of Denver brewed by Resolute Brewing called Present Ghosts. It was such an incredible beer that I called the brewery to see if it was still on tap. It was currently not, but the brewer highly recommended their newest all-star IPA, Juiceosaurus Rex. Now, because this trip wasn't really all about me, Annie and I took our birthday girl out to dinner in downtown Denver at an Asian fusion joint called Bao Brew House. You see what I just did there? Hey, the ladies love their Asian cuisine, and me, well, I'm more of a barbecue and Mexican food kind of guy, but I'm always going to manage to have a good time. The food here was great, the libations even better. We had some truly amazing cocktails, and I had a few local IPAs. The winner of the bunch at this location was the Sun Temple Hazy IPA by Spice Trade Brewing Company out of Denver. We all had a big day ahead of us on day 2 in Denver because the ladies had not even begun to spend money, and I was getting into a real time crunch to find a real showstopper of an IPA, something so remarkable that I'd have no choice but to bring some back to Kansas City as a souvenir. The girls dropped me off first at Windfall Brewing, and they sped off in the direction of the outlet malls. Bye! Windfall was quite the place, featuring a big tap list, a full kitchen, and a giant arcade rivaling any of my memories from the 1980s. And right here, boys and girls, was a red flag for me. There was perhaps too much going on in their business model in an attempt to please everybody that might walk through the doors that I had a sinking feeling in my gut that the focus might not be on the quality of the beer. When you've got limited time, picking a brewery can be pretty tricky. Because as a beer geek, I'm going to tend to avoid breweries with kitchens and huge menus, anything beyond wood-fired pizza and pretzels, and the beer quality often starts slipping at about the same rate as the distractions are escalating. The beer here was okay, but by the time the girls picked me up, I was ready for a change of scenery. The whole reason for the time crunch in Denver, I should have explained, was that Annie and I had to catch an early flight from Denver to St. George, Utah, where we were reuniting with some friends we'd met as perfect strangers on our recent cruise to Hawaii.
I love it!
If you haven't already, be sure to check out our 2-part adventure with our cruise buddies, Utah by Day and Utah by Night, as well as our 5-part series aboard the Hawaiian cruise. We captured some friggin' amazing footage in those 7 videos, if I do say so myself, and we had an absolute blast, so come along. It was at this time, in the final hours, that our daughter fired off some texts to her local friends and asked them, if you had to pick one brewery in Denver to find the absolute best IPA, where would you go? The response was immediate and unanimous. Cerebral Brewing is an IPA lover's paradise. They are no joke. Count them, 10 IPAs on tap. And you bet your behind after coming this far, I was going to try each and every one of them. It was a slam dunk for the win. Girl, you made your dad proud today. Everything about Cerebral Brewing was just cool as hell, from the old school hip hop playlist to their use of laboratory glassware, to the wallpaper of pages ripped from old biology textbooks, and no kitchen, no distractions, their focus was 100% on the quality of the beer. And the winner, hands down, the best IPA I've ever had in Denver goes to Tandem Jetpack, a silky smooth double IPA that was just exploding with hoppy goodness. And some was most definitely coming home with me after our next trip to the Mojave Desert in Utah. Thanks for coming along for the ride, and do us the favor of a like and subscribe. Cheers, kids!